Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Restaurant and Catering Queensland webinar. And our topic today is likely going to be the reopening of, the mandatory vaccination from the 17th of December, and also the new announcement of the reopening on the 13th of December. And normally we just wait a few minutes for all the participants to get in. The numbers are climbing very, very quickly. Thanks for joining us. Once it starts to stabilize okay, the number is stabilized, so we will go ahead. Jason, take it away.
Thanks, Wes. Look, welcome everyone today. As Wes said, we'll be talking about the mandate for the 17th of December. So Wes Lambert, our CEO, is here with us. We've also got Hugo Robinson. Hugo down the bottom there in the beard is the Manager of Policy and Government. And we've got Brendon Zhu is the Manager of Workplace Relations and Legal Policy. And I'm your Queensland Membership Executive. So I'd like to hand over to Brendon now. And Brendon, please.
Thank you, Jason. And yeah, before we begin, I'd like to just do an acknowledgement of country. I recognise firstly that everyone zooms in from a variety of different places, obviously throughout Queensland, but also throughout Australia. But acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we all meet and pay respect to elders, both past, present, and emerging as well. Of course, anyone on the call who identifies as Aboriginal or Indigenous. And in particular, as well for the Queensland office, which is based in Brisbane, as well the Turrbal people. And with that, I will hand over now to Wes Lambert for a brief introduction and laying out the outline for the trajectory of our industry.
So thanks everyone again for joining. If you didn't hear before, this is the Queensland webinar that's specifically to give you some insights into the 17th of December, which begins the mandatory vaccination for hospitality businesses, with the exception of food courts, and to talk about the announcement today of the borders reopening on the 13th of December and the requirements to enter into Queensland. Certainly, for many of you, not having domestic visitors from other states that were considered hotspots has certainly affected your businesses. However, Queensland actually is number 2 in the country for recovery versus 2019. In fact, overall, Queensland has had double-digit recovery since the period of 1 July to date versus 2019. Queensland is up over those previous periods, and it is highly likely to people not being able to leave Queensland to go not only overseas, but also not to some other states because of the hotspot designation. And so while there is a recovery, we do know that you have a critical workforce shortage, and certainly the reopening of the state borders on the 13th to New South Wales, and hopefully international borders in the near future will begin to get you back on track to getting your staff back up and your businesses getting back on track. And certainly I know many of you have had lots and lots of questions and emails about mandatory vaccinations. We can tell you that in New South Wales and Victoria, where we had carrot and a stick, so we were in lockdown or we were in heavy restrictions, and it certainly propelled the vaccination rates to get businesses reopened, and certainly was not as scary once we began to enact the mandatory vaccinations. We certainly had very few staff complaints, and both Victoria and New South Wales are very close to that 95% double vaccination rate, and ACT has exceeded it. So while it does seem scary because you only have a stick, you don't have a carrot, you are open and you are trading almost like you were pre-COVID. Certainly, Northern Territory has enacted mandatory vaccinations, WA, Tasmania, New South Wales, Victoria, only South Australia and ACT, of which ACT is now over 100% of eligible, Only South Australia and ACT don't have mandatory vaccinations. And we see what's happening in South Australia at the moment. They are going into border lockdowns and potential restrictions across multiple industries. We're literally waiting hour by hour for them to make certain announcements based upon the latest outbreak of community transmissions. So while there is no COVID in Queensland, once borders open, it certainly will get in. There were testing requirements into South Australia. And so it's just about not being afraid that your customers are going to be angry with you. That was a fear that existed in Victoria and New South Wales that just didn't eventuate. People are just happy to be able to go out to hospitality businesses and stay COVID safe. So I'm going to hand over to Hugo to go through some of the things that will be required on the 17th of December. And also, if you have any questions, can you please put those in the Q&A, not into the chat? It's very important that we can record the questions that do pop up. And in order for us to do that, they have to be in the Q&A section. We're here to answer your questions with the answers that we have, but also to take some questions on notice. We certainly will go back to the department. In fact, just an hour ago, the tourism minister in Queensland held a quick roundtable, which explained a few things about the 13th versus the 17th, and we can get any questions answered that we can answer very quickly. So over to you, Hugo.
Thank you, Wes, and g'day everybody. I'm Hugo Robinson, Manager of Policy and Government here at the R&CA. Look, if you've got any Q&As, please just chuck them in the Q&A. As Wes said, it really does help, and I'll put my number in the chat as well. So if you've got any pressing questions or any troubles, just give me a buzz, or I'll put my email as well, so you can send me emails there. But look, basically, what you're going to know, as said before, and you guys would know already, it's coming up. All staff and all patrons must be fully vaccinated to enter your premises. No ifs and buts. And basically, they're going to put a public health directive out maybe the day before or the week before, outlining what this looks like. And basically, you're going to have to comply with this. It is a law. These laws have been challenged in New South Wales and Victoria, and they've been knocked back every single time. And so there's really, unfortunately, nothing that you can do to get around this. I will also say that you can still serve takeaway to unvaccinated patrons. The thing is, though, is that your staff must be fully vaccinated no matter what, if they are over 16 years of age. The vaccination certificate will be accessible on the QR code check-in. You must still do the QR code check-in because it will help the Queensland government track and trace if there is a positive case. Queensland Health has indicated that they themselves will be handling what close contacts looks like and what those cases look like. So they will help determine whether your venue must be shut or not. If you do get a positive case inside your venue, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to shut down for 14 days or whatever. It's only if so there's a plane going over me right now, so you might hear that. It's only really if so I'll just wait for that. There's an army plane right next to me. Excuse me. I can't hear myself. But basically, the public health unit will decide whether there's enough cause for close contacts and isolation in your venue. At that point, all you have to do is a deep clean. And if you have other staff that weren't there on the day or they're not considered close contacts, you can immediately start back up again. So as I said, having a case in your venue doesn't necessarily mean you have to shut down completely. The fines for non-compliance to this public health order is $13,000, basically, 13,785. So it's 100 penalty units, one penalty unit being $137. So you just have to put the correct signage up. You have to have the correct codes. You don't have to be a police force in terms of, you're not actively, what I mean is the police aren't going to go around roving your restaurant or cafe to make sure you've done everything. Basically, you just have to prove in your COVID safe plan, which you'll have to update, that basically you, in your best ability, making sure that only the fully vaccinated people are coming into your premises. I can't stress that enough. The police won't be coming around. If you're putting up a big sign saying, I'm not complying with the law, then expect the police to be there, basically. But what I will say about the check-in, because I've had a lot of questions from people who've been from Queensland calling me about what does check-in look like? I won't be able to get enough people in. What happens if there's a line? It takes 2 seconds to check in. It really does. Most patrons will have it ready to go before they walk up to the door. It will take 2 seconds. You don't have to put you're not doing fingerprints and facial scans and writing down their mother's maiden name or anything like that. You're just having to look at it and they're good to go. So please just keep in mind that, as Wes said before, it is not an enormous burden on your business, but it will just maybe be an extra 20 seconds at the door when you show them to a table. So unless Wes has something to say, I might throw to Brendon.
So let's answer the questions as they come in rather than waiting until the end. So you mentioned before about businesses that are purposely non-complying. What I can tell you is that in New South Wales, multiple businesses were shut down and now face the risk of losing their liquor license for purposefully not complying. There is no such thing as pro-choice. There's no such thing as not complying with a public health order. The public health orders have been deemed lawful. So once the public health order is written and published, which is usually within 24 hours of midnight of the 17th of December or 12:01 a.m. on the 17th of December, there's no way around it. You must take all reasonable measures to comply. Hugo, do you want to answer the question about the first and second jab?
Which ones? I have 3 of my kids. Hold on, whereabouts? Oh,
Yeah.
no, basically they must be fully vaccinated no matter what. There's no first dose or second dose, first dose only. They must be fully vaccinated.
So I'm going to leave Leanne's question until after Brendon talks about your responsibilities as an employee.
I'll answer Trent's. If you want. Yes, Trent. Anything on your premises basically counts. So if they get your food and take away and sit in a park, they're okay to do that if they're unvaccinated. But if it is your table and chairs and it is counted as part of your premises, then they must basically be checked. Donna Ballantyne, it's a $13,000 fine. 13.
So Melissa, I would say that it's up to you how you operate your business. I know in New South Wales and Victoria that takeaway and delivery is the only thing that's available for unvaccinated. So certainly counter service and standing outside to wait for the unvaccinated is the best way to go. But again, however is best for your business. The next question, I think, again, goes is to Brendon. So we'll hold that one. So that's Miles's answer. The Felipe's question about accommodation hotels. So I've got the documentation in front of me. Accommodation providers are considered essential services except for the venues within them, which can only allow fully vaccinated. So you cannot use premises that are on the list that require vaccination, which are hospitality venues, indoor entertainment, weddings, festivals, those things. There are some businesses that are not, but a pool bar is a hospitality business. So you have to be vaccinated to use a pool bar. Golf is not our industry. So that's the sporting industries. We don't know the answer to that.
You can actually play a round of golf unvaccinated. You just can't go into the clubhouse for a meal.
Hugo, you want to grab maybe Veronica's question?
Veronica, how are we going to do it if a big and organised party, say hundreds of people? You're going to have to check every single vaccination. Short and simple.
Yeah, so in New South Wales, it really, I've been to multiple events. I went to the races. Certainly, it doesn't take long. It really takes just literally a few seconds to check people's. Laura, we'll stick to the staff questions after Brendon goes. Yes, Leanne, we understand it will be time consuming, but it's not. You get them at the door. So you need to get your patrons either at the door or point of sale. You don't want to get in an argument with people once they're already sitting down. That actually can create a much worse situation. So Alan has a question about guests with no phone, Hugo.
Yeah, so if you have no phone, you still will have to show some form of identification. So you'll need to bring your certificate, which has your vax certificate, which you can print off, and then you'll have to check in by manual. So you'll have to keep like a spread, like if you have like a spreadsheet, or you just put down their names and details that you just hold on to. But yeah, you will have to show no matter what. If they don't have a phone, they don't have a vax passport, they're not coming in.
Yeah, so ultimately you as a business have to take reasonable steps to ensure that your staff and your patrons that are dine in are fully vaccinated. So, Ebony, you have a question about checking in. That'll be in the public health orders. So the public health orders have not yet been published. It depends on what state. So it may be such a case that people have to wait outside for their takeaway orders, or they may be able to come inside to the point of sale. It'll be in the public health orders, and we'll publish those as soon as they are live, and we'll certainly give some commentary.
I'll answer Andrew Hargraves' question about staff members with medical exemption certificates. Yes, they can work if they have a medical exemption.
So Natalie, private functions. There's not necessarily anything such as a private function in terms of you. So if you are providing hospitality services, if you are a hospitality venue, so therefore a catering license, you are effectively running a business in that particular event. So it's important that if you're the one that's going to get fined because you are invoicing someone for a catered event, that they're following the rules set out for you as a business. But again, it depends on what the public health orders say. Each state is slightly different in terms of that. Wow, we have quite a lot of questions, more than most. Sorry, Brendo, to delay you. Just many of these questions are related to Hugo's section. Hugo, you want to take the cellar door question as it pertains to other states that have had cellar doors as hospitality venues?
Yeah, so you can do takeaway. Basically, they can't stay for any longer period of time or consume anything on the premises. So they can't really come in for a tasting. They're going to have to just come in, pick up, leave.
So the next question, Marie, ultimately, you shouldn't really be letting customers in. And what we didn't find in New South Wales and Victoria is that there were a lot of people that were testing it. Ultimately, most people just came to the door and quickly checked in and showed their vaccine status. Look, you can't go to an airport, you can't get on a plane, you won't be able to get in a cruise. There's lots and lots of things that you just won't be able to do nationally unless you're vaccinated. And Queensland is, certainly getting vaccinated faster than it was. It's, approaching that 80%. And obviously, while that is not the same as the 90+% that New South Wales, ACT, and Victoria have, it's certainly a respectable percentage. You will find that, only 2 out of 10 eligible adults aren't double vaccinated. And that will get better and better every day. It's just very important for you to put the signage up that Hugo's going to put in the chat from an email that I sent out earlier today, so that you have those signs. So Hugo, do you want to talk about Philippe's question about vaccinated staff?
Yeah, so we'll have a clearer picture once the public health directive's out. You won't be breaching Privacy Acts unless you sort of like accidentally leak it or somewhat. But it really depends on what the public health directive says. So if they ask you in the health directive to take down, basically, if they ask you to take down their vaccination certificate, then you have to do it. And as I said before in my speech, is that the public health directive just overrides whatever's there. They will still push it.
In addition, the Fair Work Ombudsman has let us know the Privacy Act does not apply to any business with less than $3 million of revenue. So it just doesn't apply altogether. And I know that some employees talk about disability and talk about, you're breaching my, human rights and the Privacy Act, and that they don't really know what they're talking about, because the Fair Work Ombudsman of the land, in her first speech about mandatory vaccinations, said, I want to let everyone know that the Privacy Act in any state and federally only applies to businesses with more than $3 million in revenue. So it's just really important to stand your ground with your staff. They cannot come to work for you unless they're double vaxxed. And I know it's difficult, but Brenda will touch more on it in just a second. So Hugo?
Where are we up to? So I'll answer Melissa's question. Is that what we're up to?
So no. So we're holding all the ones that are sorry, I need to press done. We're holding all the ones that are related to workplace until afterwards.
Yep.
So
Ebony, I think.
Yep, Ebony Harvey.
Yep. So Ebony, basically under 16s are not covered by this. So they'll still need to check in as a dependent under their parents, but they don't have to be fully vaccinated to enter.
Yeah. So Chris, I'm really sorry you have a big venue. Ultimately, it's not about closing off exits. It's about ensuring that your patrons either come to the counter or cannot sit down. Obviously, people don't just go randomly sit down at whatever table they want to. It's really about catching them at the point of sale or the host stand, and ensuring that they're double vaccinated before they sit down. Yes, you can enter a bottle shop unvaccinated. That's essential retail. I know that certainly seems funny, but welcome to Australia. Mark Randall, that golf's not our industry, so we can't really give you any details about golf. You just can't go into the clubhouse if you're not vaccinated. Hugo, you already had a good answer for Melissa's question. I'll
reiterate it quickly. We'll have to see what the public health order says, but other states have basically said that you either have to have a copy of it or you just have to say that you have seen it.
Same for Marie's question. Again, that's
and Natalie.
Yeah. So you will. It'll depend on what the public health order says. In some states, it says that you need to cite it every time they come to work, and some say you keep a record of what you viewed. So, for example, Sally, employee, on this date showed me her Medicare vaccination certificate, and that's it. You don't have to keep a copy, or you just have to be able to statutorily declare that you've seen it. And certainly, what a lot of staff don't understand is they won't be able to go to any restaurant. They won't be able to go to a bar, a nightclub, a restaurant, anywhere. So I know that a lot of your staff, are hesitant or may have gotten a first shot and not a second, but they won't be able to participate in anything. So any angst that they're having, it's important to have a consultative conversation that they're really going to be missing out. So are there any more? No, hold on. So I think there's one last. Ebony asked the same question about 16-year-olds. Once you turn 16, you need to get vaccinated. And yes, that means that if they're not vaccinated before they're 16, that there will be a period of time where they can't work. And so we're going to go back to Karen Purcell's question. Hugo, you want to take that one?
Yeah, for a food court and for consuming inside of premises, they must be fully vaccinated. To go inside the actual shopping center itself, that's okay. But yeah, basically to sit down and eat, you're going to have to be fully vaccinated.
Well, no, food courts are essential services. So that's where the difference is. So food court, yes, but staff need to be vaccinated, yes. So a food court in a shopping center is an essential service, but the staff must be, because the staff work for a restaurant. Felipe, Hugo, you want to take Felipe's question about private events?
As Wes said, you're not counting as a private sort of venue. And so it's harder to justify to the police why you'd be able to do it inside your actual hospitality premises. It would be for like catering at home.
Yeah, so again, it'll be in the public health order. Normally it's very specific about how the state defines private residences. But again, that's a very, very specific question. In someone's house, you're allowed to have an unlimited number of people, but I'm having a wedding. Well, a wedding reception is a wedding reception. It doesn't matter where it is. So if a caterer is catering a wedding on private property, it's still a wedding reception. And so if you have more than 20 people unvaccinated, then you run the risk of having trouble with your catering and liquor license. So, you know, there are always going to be those gray area questions. All right, so we have burned through all the questions that are unrelated to workplace. So over to you, Brenda.
Thank you, Wes, and thank you, Hugo, for that very comprehensive look at the, what is in reality a very complex regulations and framework that we are all working with in hospitality, and in particular in Queensland. And so the main part that I'll be covering this afternoon will be, in light of the fact that this December 17 day is impending, and the state government has required hospitality staff to be fully vaccinated, what your next step is and the approach as a result, and what to do with your staff. So of course, one of the things that we say to our members, regardless of which state that they are in, is communicating what the Queensland government or what your respective state government has said about vaccination, that there is this particular date, which is the cutoff, where you would need to be vaccinated, and encouraging them as a result to do that. Having that conversation is always the best way to go to encourage staff to be vaccinated. We always want to be, let's say, relying on the public health orders last, and we want to just be doing it through conversation. And if there's any way where you can convince your employees, and I appreciate that it can be very difficult, and for some staff, it doesn't matter what you say to them, they don't want to be vaccinated. But for the ones who are open to or just a little bit hesitant, that is certainly the way to go, having that constructive conversation with them. But I know, and I am completely aware that everyone feels like they're an epidemiologist these days, an expert in vaccines. And so it's not as simple as I've just said. But that is certainly the starting point, and the first point is communicating that to your employees. Now, if you reach this particular deadline and a staff member has not fulfilled those requirements, as required by the public health order, there are a couple of avenues which you can explore with varying risks. And one of the things that we want to do at all times is to reduce the amount of risk ultimately. And so the first one, and the first option that you can consider for your staff, and in particular for those who refuse and don't want to be vaccinated, is, and you've let them know that these are the public health orders and these are the deadlines, is that they can be put, they can request, and I mean the employee, request to be on leave as a result of that. and they request to use up any accrued leave that they may have until you reach a point, which is certainly the case in all states, where eventually even those who are unvaccinated will be able to work. Certainly in New South Wales and Victoria, given the persistent outbreaks of Delta, where as a result of that, the lockdowns were extensive and extended, and there was an initial time period where vaccinations were required in order for hospitality staff to return back to the workforce. Now, we've reached a point where in these eastern states of New South Wales and Victoria, of a vaccination rate that eclipses 90% and above, where as a result of that, there is this new deadline where once this date has been met or 95% double vaccinated is reached, then even unvaccinated people can work. And so I share that point as a learning experience from the other states, because this is a guiding factor of what the other states, and including in Queensland, is looking towards. That for a period of time, it could be 3 months, it could be more, it could be less. There will be a time period where you have to be double vaccinated to work, but there will come a day where a certain threshold has been met, where even the unvaccinated can be work. But the unfortunate bit is we don't know that date yet, and we don't know what the Palaszczuk government is leaning towards. So as a result, the first one is the utilisation of any entitlements such as leave. Now, the next one is where the employee elects to take unpaid leave, where they've seen the public health response, they recognise they're not vaccinated, and they don't have a genuine medical exemption. And as a result, they cannot work. And what they can do is they can elect to, if they've used up all their leave, to take unpaid leave as a result of that. And that would certainly be one of the lower risk approaches as well. Now, the third option and alternative is to stand down staff in response to a government directive, where you are in a position as a business and employer where you can stand down staff without pay in response to a government directive that is beyond your control. So because it's in response to a public health order, because it's in response to a government directive, you are able to stand down staff for things that are outside your control. And there are stand down templates on the member resources section of our website, of the Restaurant Catering website, which you can use for this particular scenario. Now, I know, and I have seen, certain rhetoric and sentences and paragraphs on the Fair Work website where they certainly lean against the utilisation of stand downs. But that is in particular for states where it has not been mandated with a public health order. And very clearly with Queensland, because it is in response to a government directive, that is the public health order. That is why that would strengthen your ability to be able to use the stand down without pay and be able to therefore have staff who are stood down without pay. Now, if you didn't want to go through that approach and you wanted to dismiss employees, that is certainly one of the higher risk ones as well. There are always talks of precedents and test cases for the dismissal of unvaccinated staff. Now, there hasn't been one per se for the hospitality industry. There've obviously been a few flu jab related test cases with industries such as childcare and other essential services. And so there are risks with it if you wanted to dismiss employees in response to not having a COVID vaccination. Now, one of the things, and I'll touch on this because there was a question here about the BHP case and the findings where if you wanted to make a COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory for your workforce, and there are two scenarios, one with the backing of the public health order, but the alternative, let's say in a scenario where there is no public health order and you wanted to do it. The BHP case is a very specific case with a very specific context. It does not necessarily translate to all industries or employers, and the facts of that case need to either be analogous or distinguished between your own, specific business context. Now, one of the things that they found with that BHP case where the the ruling was that the mandatory vaccination policy, was not upheld. A big part of that was because of consultation with staff. And one of the things that they had mistakenly or intentionally omitted was a proper consultation process. Now at R&CA, we have a member template for consultation with staff, a consultation survey, which if you are exploring a mandatory vaccination policy, I certainly encourage you to look at, to get those steps in place and to make sure you tick off those consultation provisions. Because as we have seen with this BHP case, it is very important to do. I'm just looking at the other questions now in relation to industrial relations, but also if there's anything relevant. So I'm just going backwards here. So Lee has a question of a full-time employee who will not get vaccinated. So paying out the holiday pay, which is about 3 weeks. And in this scenario, they're not, Lee doesn't want to terminate their employment and the employee does not want to quit. So to reinforce, there could be the employee choosing to take leave without pay. Alternatively, the standing down in response to a government directive is an option that can be explored. And yeah, that would certainly be the way to go, unless of course they have a genuine medical exemption. And so that's something you would want to look at for that particular scenario. In relation to Miles' question about having an ICO with the restaurant on site where the kitchen produces food, that is not, my understanding from reading the question, is not primarily for the public, but it's just to train the students and the food is disposed of accordingly. Yeah, you certainly would want to double check with the RTO and with the staff in terms of whether it'd be defined as the education sector or the hospitality sector, and how that impacts and whether that is relevant for that particular context, where if education is deemed as within the essential services, whether that is a scenario where you do not need to have mandatory vaccination. Now, with what does a medical exemption look like? Is this outlined by the government or can anyone get one from a doctor? Certainly we have seen in certain states that what is called a medical contraindication form is quite precise. And it's not as simple as having something signed off by the GP. That is something that we will be following very closely with Queensland Health about to see whether they have a formal medical contraindication form. And certainly if there is one that the team here find, it will be disseminated in our emails that we send out twice a week. And so certainly keep an eye out for any forms that are more formal in nature. Now, the next one is staff shortages and allowing 3 months of time for a staff member who's unvaxxed to be able to work where the staff must wear PPE and produce negative shift. Look, that is just something we have not heard of and is not in the public health order, and certainly not what we expect. The announcements from the state government is that you need to be double vaccinated and there is no alternative to that. In terms of, I've just got Alan's question in front of me, an employee who doesn't want to get vaccinated and we're going to have to stand them down, how long this could last? Yeah, that really depends on the Queensland government. If we look at, as a starting point, just for our own knowledge, New South Wales and Victoria, what we have found is that could be around a 2-month wait. And certainly, the last few percentage points to get to that 90, 95 mark, it is quite of a slow process. And so it could be 2 months, it could be 3 months, depending on uptake. And it really depends on what the Palaszczuk government determines as their threshold in which they completely open up fully fledged. And so that is just something to consider in terms of time frame if you're looking at standing down staff indefinitely.
So what I will also say is that, for example, the state of Victoria, WA, Queensland, Tasmania, and Northern Territory do not have an end date for their vaccination status. So only New South Wales has defined a date, 15 December, when you no longer have to prove your vaccination status, but the other states have not. So ultimately, it's open-ended, and that's where Brendon is talking about when you are speaking to your staff about their future options. It's because there is no light at the end of the tunnel, and so you have a greater chance of less risk. So ultimately, no one can tell you how a fair work or unfair dismissal case will go. No one can tell you which way it's going to go. So what you have to do is take reasonable steps. So there's a public health order in place. Yep. There are cases in the community, which is going to happen when the borders open. The Fair Work Commission and the Fair Work Ombudsman has a 4-tiered system. Tier 3 is for restaurants where there are cases in the community and there's a public health order. So then you are creating the reason why you might have to terminate an employee or stand down an employee who refuses to get a vaccination. You cannot break the law as a business, period. You cannot let staff work in your business unvaccinated, period. So if that staff member is choosing not to get vaccinated, then they are legally unavailable to work. You are not terminating or disciplining them because they're not vaccinated. You are terminating or disciplining them because they cannot enter your premise. So in the construction industry, if you turned up to a construction site with thongs, shorts, and a singlet on, and they allowed you to enter the construction site, they would be breaking the law and subject to very large fines. So the safety officer wouldn't let you come in. And if you did that successively every day for a long period of time, you would eventually be terminated. So ultimately, because there is no end date in Queensland for vaccination mandates, meaning you as a business owner cannot give that employee a date that they can return to work. If that employee chooses not to comply with the public health order, it cannot enter the place of work, you are not required to pay them for not working. The Fair Work Commission has never said that you have to continue to pay people who are not working because they refuse to follow the public health order. It's just very important that you work with Brendon. So Brendon at rca.asn.au. It's very important that you work very closely with an advisor to ensure that you follow all the right steps. You can't just tell someone, hey, I'm canning you because you're not vaccinated. That will get you in hot water. You have to take all the proper steps if you're going to affect anything on an employee. So the next question is Mark. No, you cannot take international COVID vaccination forms. Everyone who enters Australia that wants to be able to enter a hospitality business, work in a hospitality business, needs to go to Medicare and to Border Force and get their international certificate legitimized so that it can be added to their vaccination record, so that it can be uploaded into their Medicare app.
Marie, basically the mandate is 100% a law, there's no precedence of anyone being sued and that going their way, basically.
Yeah, there's you're a private business. Hospitality has always been no shirt, no shoes, no service. You're a private business. You are not a public place. You can refuse service to anyone for a non-discretionary reason, which is sex, race, sexual orientation, disability. But if somebody is drunk, you can refuse them service. If somebody is naked, you can refuse them service. If somebody refuses to check in and is not vaccinated, you can refuse them service. The real tricky questions only come up for staff members because there's a Fair Work Act and there's a public health order, and you have to make sure that you're balancing them out. As far as patrons go, it's always your right to ask a patron to leave for any reason.
Paris says in the chat, if I decide I do not want to discriminate, what are the fines and how is this going to be policed? Some cafes in my area are posting on their Facebook that they will not discriminate. Basically, the fines will probably be $13,000, but they may increase that in the public health directive. This is going to get policed by the police coming in and checking in to see if you are in fact following the actual compliance of checking people in and checking their vaccination status. And they could do that via undercover police or checking the statuses of people who are sitting in your premises and your staff. And the cafes who are posting on Facebook, I reckon there's a safe bet that the police would probably be writing those names down, and they'll probably be paying them a visit as soon as December 17 hits. So, look, ultimately, I just wouldn't risk getting that massive fine.
No, and you know, it's we live in a democracy, so we always say, we put a survey out early in the piece. You know, do hospitality businesses want mandatory vaccinations for their staff, for their patrons? And while at the time it was just in the mid 60s, and now is closer to 70% around the country, we live in a democracy. And so once it's more than 50%, then it becomes the law of the land. We're about to go into federal elections. And certainly, you know, if it's one seat, then, you know, then that party will control government. So about 70% of all businesses in Australia and about 70% of all patrons prefer vaccine mandates and vaccinated businesses. And yes, there will be 30% that don't want it, but ultimately there's 70% that do. And so, you know, ultimately it is our responsibility as your advisors and your organization to let you know that that it will be the law, and it has been challenged in court, and every challenge has failed because the Biosecurities Act is such a strong document, and it supersedes all other laws that have come before it, and it is past muster. And in Victoria, for example, you know, many powers were conferred upon the Premier. And look, you can disagree with it, absolutely, but you have been enforcing Queensland laws every day in your business. You don't serve alcohol to 12-year-olds. Why? Because the law says you can't. You know, you have had food safety standards, food handling standards, liquor license standards, your DA. You have enforced the laws of Queensland, whether you agreed with them or not, since the day that you opened your business. This is just another law. You might not agree with it, but for the time being, unfortunately or fortunately, we have to. And we have seen many cases of businesses being closed and put their liquor license at risk. And the court system has not been very nice to them, because ultimately, in general, it has been accepted that vaccine mandates are a line of defense against community transmission. So Craig Squire, please elaborate on a QR code check-in. They have a copy of their vax certificate. Yes, that's good. But cannot check into the business. You may need to keep a log of the person and the check-in. So not take the information off of that certificate, but how you would normally check them in, cited Medicare certificate. It will depend on the public health order. In New South Wales and Victoria, they were very specific on what you had to do. And in fact, in Victoria, they sent out a template. Yes, you have to check in every day, every time. And in fact, if your check-in expires or you check out, you got to check in again. So so if there are no more questions, we have certainly gone over time, and we certainly respect that many of you have a lot going on. And we certainly understand that you know, lots of customers don't like that they have to be double vaxxed. But again, there is very little that you will be able to do outside of your local government area and essential retail unvaccinated. There will likely not be a time when you can travel internationally or get on a cruise or get on a plane. Certainly in New South Wales and Victoria, there you can't go in a Centrelink office. You know, certain services won't be available unless you're double vaxxed. And you know, we expect that triple vaxxed will be the new definition of fully vaxxed in the very near future. So yes, there will be a percentage of the population that refuses, and in some states they will find it very quickly that the conveniences that they had enjoyed before COVID will be certainly less and less. So Hugo has put some great information, and Brendon has put up the IR hotline, and I've put Brendon's email into a couple of your individual questions. So we certainly thank you for joining us. If you need to reach out again for anything specific, please call Jason. If you're not a member of Restaurant and Catering, certainly call Jason. He's going to drop his phone number very quickly into the chat so that you can contact him directly. And if you have any questions, you can definitely email Hugo or Brendon. Hugo at rca.asn.au and Brendon at rca.asn.au, and of course Jason. And if you have any questions for me, you can get them definitely through anyone here. I did give out my mobile phone number in one webinar, and for the next 2 days after that, I have calls every hour. So I'm certainly always available, but email wes@rca.asn.au. Okay, thanks everybody, and another great webinar with great attendance. And look, we totally understand that it's going to be a big shock to many of your customers come the 17th of December, and you need to follow reasonable endeavors to ensure that you comply with the public health order. And hopefully we will get through COVID early in 2022, and all of this will get behind us. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.